How will Saudi Arabia respond to more drone attacks on its oil processing plants? Half of the kingdom's daily output of crude is knocked out, threatening higher prices worldwide. Iran dismisses US accusations of involvement. Is the possibility of a war between Iran and the Saudis increasing? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hashim Ahalbarra. It's being described as an unprecedented attack on the world's energy supply. Oil prices are expected to rise after Saudi Arabia was forced to cut production in half. Houthi rebels in Yemen say their latest drone attacks on the world's largest oil exporter were a major success, knocking out the world's largest processing plant at Abqaiq. It's not known how long repairs will take. Oil markets haven't seen a shutdown on this scale since Iraq's army invaded Kuwait to start the first Gulf War in 1990. Iran is dismissing US accusations it was behind the attacks. The Houthis are warning of more to come.
These attacks are our right, and we warn the Saudis that our targets will keep expanding. We have the right to strike back in retaliation to the airstrikes and the targeting of our civilians for the last 5 years.
Let's have a look at some of the recent attacks on Saudi Arabia. In May, Saudi government said a drone attack damaged a main pipeline and 2 oil pumping stations west of the capital, Riyadh. In June, 26 civilians were wounded in what the Saudi UAE-led coalition in Yemen said was a Houthi missile attack on Abha airport on the south of the kingdom. Last month, Houthi rebels say they fired a long-range missile at the port city of Dammam in the northeast. 4 days later, Houthi forces say they launched more drone attacks on 2 airports at Abha and Najran, as well as the King Khalid Air Base near Riyadh. And on August the 26th, Houthi rebels say they launched a drone attack on a military target in Riyadh. Let's bring in our guests in Sana'a, Hussein Al-Bukhaiti, a Yemeni affairs specialist. Via Skype in Lancaster, Simon Mabon, director at the Richardson Institute for Peace Studies at Lancaster University. And in Houston, Texas, Josh Young, portfolio manager at Bison Interests, an energy investment firm. Welcome to you all. Hussein, the latest attack on the oil installations in Saudi Arabia, is this a new phase in the conflict in Yemen? Is this a new escalation?
Yes, I believe it's a new escalation. We remember that the previous drone attack on the oil pumping station and as well on Al-Shaiba oil field in Saudi near United Arab Emirates, it was kind of a message to Saudi Arabia that we're going to start to target your oil infrastructure. But because the Saudi actually has continued its war and its campaign and blockade on Yemen, they haven't done anything to the Hudaydah agreement. That's why Yemeni army here in Sana'a has decided that they should bring this war to the backbone of the Saudi economy, which is the oil field, and that's why they have targeted one of the largest oil field or oil production site in the world. And I think that if Saudi will continue its war, or if they're not gonna come to stop its blockade on Yemen, to open the port and the airport here in Sana'a and Hudaydah, Yemeni army spokesperson have said that they will continue this type of strikes and attacks, and there are more bigger attack to come.
Simon, we're talking about Saudi Arabia, which is one of the biggest oil producers in the world. And now with this potential for more disruptions to happen in the near future, should the international community be concerned, or should oil markets be concerned?
Yeah, I think it's easy to see how that might be a conclusion to be drawn. The international community has long been focused on Yemen, albeit for slightly different reasons. There's been a great deal of humanitarian concerns about the ongoing situation there, the ongoing bombing campaign and the devastating impact, the potential for catastrophic human suffering beyond the scale that we're seeing right now. So the international community is focusing on it, but much like it's focusing on events in the Persian Gulf and the concerns about the disruption to shipping, which of course will have a potentially have an impact on the oil markets. This type of response and this type of action, I think, within the Yemeni conflict could also have massive repercussions for the global economy. And so I think it adds another dimension to the international community focus, which could hopefully put additional pressure on the parties involved to get this conflict to an end and to put an end to the humanitarian suffering.
Josh, Saudi Arabia was widely known for having this ability to cushion against any oil price spikes because of the spare crude production of about 2.4 million barrels per day they can pump. Is that something that should be reconsidered now with this unprecedented attack at the heart of the Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think actually if you look at what was priced into oil on Friday versus what may get priced in on Monday, there was actually some concern that there might have been additional barrels coming online from the Middle East, particularly from Iran. And so that seems less likely right now. And then, like you're saying, the risk of Saudi Arabia more fully supplying the market, again, from an oil price perspective, that could be perceived as a risk, that is reduced, obviously. There are different reports saying that production could come back online anywhere from 2 days to 2 weeks, to other reports are saying much longer than that. And if it does, in fact, take multiple weeks for oil production to come back online from this particular facility that got attacked, as well as from the field that got attacked, that could have a really substantial effect both on the price of oil as well as on the Saudi economy.
Hussein, a Houthi spokesperson said that the Houthis managed to fly 10 drones into Saudi Arabia. These were the same drones that struck the oil installations. But there is a prevailing sentiment there is absolutely no way the Houthis have the capabilities to build, manufacture, maintain drones to target Saudi Arabia, which is one of the wealthiest nations on earth.
I mean, they have the ability, even though there is a blockade on Yemen, which has forced the Houthi to depend on themselves, to depend on people here in Yemen who have the ability or have studied outside, either in Russia, in North Korea, and other area. And we have seen that the attack started on Najran airport and on Jazan and Abha, and the Saudi didn't say, I mean, they didn't blame or saying that those drones came from another area, but Yemeni army here is well capable of using these drones, and we have seen in this attack that if the Saudi actually will keep trying to blame someone else, if they will try to stop this war on Yemen, everything gonna stop. So there is no need for this blaming game, but they're trying to look for an scapegoat, because for the reputation to be defeated by a group which Saudi considered as they have no support in Yemen. But it's actually what's clear now, that the upper hand now is for the Yemeni army, and even though they have simple drones, Saudi Arabia have all the type of weapons from the United States, and still they couldn't do anything to stop those attacks on Saudi Arabia. And I just want to mention one more thing. We remember that Saudi, in the last 3 or 4 months, most of their strikes, they claim that they have target drones factory. So why now they are trying to blame someone else, or that this drone came from Iraq or another area?
Simon, we're talking about Saudi Arabia, which is the world's third highest spender on military equipment, investing something like almost $70 billion in 2018. Yet, they cannot intercept and destroy small drones. Some of them don't cost more than 15,000 US dollars, with a massive impact on their economy.
Yeah. This is, I guess, a paradigmatic example of asymmetric warfare, and the ways in which across history we've seen incredibly powerful military organizations, armies, militias, whatever it may be, that have struggled in the face of creative responses, of asymmetric responses that have been able to circumvent the the huge military might. I mean, we saw that across Iraq in the post-invasion years when the United States fought a counterinsurgency campaign. The U.S. is a hugely dominant military force, but struggled to curtail the militias and the organizations that were challenging them. And it's the same thing here. You can put in place all this fancy military hardware and military structures, but in some cases you can't actually legislate or indeed prevent a drone from flying in without some type of shield or something like that. So it's a paradigmatic example of asymmetric warfare, and there's very little that you can do to stop it unless you try and take out the root cause, which is why we're seeing these attacks on drone factories.
Josh, we are in an area where there's this ongoing debate, strained relations between Iran and between the US about the supply of routes across the Strait of Hormuz. Add to that what is happening now in Saudi Arabia and the installations which have been recently hit. Is this the beginning of a new geopolitical context where oil supplies have to be redefined in a way or another?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think we've been in a period where there's almost been a geopolitical discount for oil rather than a geopolitical premium. And that has seemed inappropriate to me and has driven me to be long oil equities because they're particularly mispriced. But yeah, I think it's one of these strange things where oil had done so poorly and been so oversupplied for so long that quantitative analysts, quantitative funds have just been shorting any rally in oil from a price perspective, and from a size perspective, the paper barrels available on Wall Street and across CTAs and other quantitative trading platforms are much larger than the fundamental barrels that are produced and sold on a daily basis. And that, I think, has kept this discount longer and made it larger than it should be. And I think we're in the process, and we may see a revaluation starting on Monday of geopolitical discount going to geopolitical premium.
Hussein, the Americans, the Saudis, and many others believe that what the Houthis are achieving is due to the help they are getting from the Iranians, particularly from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. From that perspective, do you believe that we are going towards a broader confrontation between the Saudis and the Iranians where Yemen could be the battleground?
I mean, those claim they actually try to ignore that there is a blockade on Yemen. Nothing go in or out of Yemen, only must be searched by the Saudi-led coalition. And on the other hand, let's say that their claims is right. If Iran really is supplying these weapons, this means that the blockade on Yemen has failed, that the Saudi Arabia has killed 250,000 of Yemenis because of the blockade. UNICEF have said one child died every 10 minutes because of preventable diseases. So, I mean, why did they enforce this blockade on Yemen? And why? I mean, they should go to war with Iran instead of fighting someone who say is proxy and you cannot defeat him. So how can you actually defeat Iran if it's Iran really who is supplying those weapons? But those weapons and those attacks on Saudi did not start only after Saudi launched its war on Yemen. Saudi is not only targeting Houthi, they even killing each other in the south. Saudi declared the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. The same thing with United Arab Emirates, which claim 2 islands is occupied by Iran. The only thing they want from Yemen, they just want to occupy Yemen to control Socotra Island and other islands and the main Bab el-Mandab Strait. That's why they came to Yemen. They didn't come to fight Iran.
Okay.
Iran is in United Arab Emirates. There are flights going from there. So they should focus on Iran and leave Yemen.
Simon, Saudi Arabia is bogged down in this conflict in Yemen, which has turned out to be a total embarrassment. And do you think that at this particular stage, are they going to engage in any confrontation with the Iranians, or they are just in one position where they have to sort of swallow their pride?
I think the Saudi-Iranian rivalry is long and it's complex, and it transcends the Yemen conflict. And I think we must put it into context here. We must say, look, this rivalry while it has it's taken on an additional meaning after the revolution of 1979, it has its roots far earlier than that, and it's about a struggle for regional supremacy. It's a struggle for regional order, and we see that continuing to play out, albeit with the sort of the veneer of religion in the years after 1979. And that's where we can see it playing out in Yemen, of course, as a struggle to exert influence and to preserve particular forms of political organization. But it also plays out in Iraq, in Bahrain, in Syria, and in Lebanon in different ways, in context-specific ways. And I think what we see is that the Saudis are increasingly concerned not only about increasing Iranian influence, but their own position vis-a-vis that. And so that way, I think it'll be incredibly hard to see the Saudis winding back from this. I think it'll be difficult to see them taking a step back because of concerns about what this could mean for the Iranians and their influence, but also what that would mean for their own legitimacy for both domestic audiences and international in the struggle against the Iranians.
Josh, this comes when the Saudis are really excited about what they consider to be plans for the largest initial public offering of stock in the world for their oil company, Aramco, which they believe could be one of the biggest financial events of all times. Is this something that comes as a major setback for all those plans?
Yeah, I mean, ironically, every news article, every news headline, every news segment like this, is going to further exacerbate the political risk that gets priced into Saudi Aramco. I think a way to think about it is for every dollar per barrel that oil goes up on Sunday night from a U.S. perspective, or Monday morning, that should translate into a multi-dollar per barrel discount in the valuation for Saudi Aramco relative to what it might have been a couple weeks ago prior to this kind of further physical and geopolitical risk getting priced in. And I think there's been a little bit of misunderstanding about what Aramco could or should be worth. There's this idea that, I mean, it's almost like being talked about like a WeWork or something like that, where it gets valued at this kind of extreme high valuation. While Aramco does produce a lot of barrels of oil, oil companies predominantly today are trading as a multiple of the EBITDA that they generate. So the earnings before interest, taxation, depreciation, and amortization. So if you look at what Aramco actually earns, net of taxes and royalties and so on, and we don't have the exact financials out, but if you look at what they likely earn, and then you look at the additional discount that needs to get put on their multiple, given the geopolitical risk and the actual physical security risk of their barrels being able to get produced and getting processed and getting sold, I mean, one could argue that the likely valuation if they went public tomorrow would be substantially lower than the number that they're talking about.
Hussein, you've been talking about the Houthis determined to continue their drone attacks, but don't you think that this is something that could backfire? Because when you hit Saudi Arabia, what it hurts, they might come back with massive airstrikes than ever before.
I don't think that the Saudi has anything to offer now, because they have used all their force at the beginning of this war, and they haven't reached anything. But on the other hand, we see that the Houthi is using their war against Saudi Arabia stage by stage. And I think the first war in history, that one side, which is Ansar the Houthi here in Sana'a, always warning the Saudi, stop your war or we're gonna target your main vital site. You should stop this war or we're going to extend our attack deep inside Saudi Arabia. And the main issue here is not about where the weapons come from, because we know Saudi Arabia buy all the weapons from the United States. There is US and UK personnel inside Saudi Arabia helping them. The main issue, there is one country with Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates as well, launched a war against Yemen or against the Houthi. Either you agree with them or not. And you should expect that this group, they will attack back, they will retaliate, they will try to defend themselves. But now we see Saudi is crying out loud in every corner of the world about those attacks. And I just want to add one more important thing about those statements from US official about that Iran is to blame or those drones came from Iraq. We shouldn't actually listen to United States. We remember before the invasion of Iraq, Colin Powell in the UN Security Council with a small pipe have said that this pipe can kill everyone in the room, and they have launched a war against Iraq. to find weapons of mass destruction. They haven't found anything. They destroy entire country. This
Okay.
is the same thing they want to do to Yemen. But I believe there are more attacks coming on Saudi Arabia, especially on their oil infrastructure.
Simon, the US accused Iran for being behind those attacks and offered help to Saudi Arabia. Could this translate into a new pact where the Americans would say, you know what, I think for the sake of a smooth energy supply worldwide, we need to protect the Saudis. We need to build a new defensive infrastructure to put an end to those attacks targeting the oil installations?
Quite possibly, yeah. I mean, what we've, I think, seen since Donald Trump came to power is an increasing rapprochement between the Saudis and the Americans. Because prior to Trump, under Obama, there'd been a lot of friction. There'd been an increasingly fractious relationship between Washington and Riyadh. And so under Trump, he visited Riyadh as his first official state visit. We start to see this thawing, this cultivation of a relationship between Donald Trump and Mohammed bin Salman and the king. And I think this is probably the next logical step. We know that there's been a great deal of trade between the two, defense spending, etc. So I think this would be the next step in a relationship that has really gone back to strength, gone back to its really real fundamentals, I should say. But I think that if this does happen, then it will really play into Iranian concerns. It will really exacerbate their fears. Iran has long seen itself as uniquely qualified to assert regional security, whereas the Saudis are reliant on external funders and external actors. So this would really exacerbate tensions, I think, and make the situation far worse.
Josh, if you look at the targeted oil facilities, they can process something like 9 million barrels a day. And the production that was cut off because of the attack is estimated at something like 5.7 million barrels a day, talking about over half of the nation's overall daily output. Do you expect the oil prices worldwide to be affected? Are we going to see a dramatic increase in the oil prices in the coming days or weeks?
Yeah, that's a great question. The estimates that I've seen have been anywhere from a 5 to 15% potential gap up in oil prices from the closing price on Friday to the opening price on Monday. My personal view is that actually the more interesting place to look isn't going to be in the spot price for physical crude, and it's not going to be the NYMEX spot price. It's going to be the combination of the forward curve. So what does oil look like 3 months out, a year out? And then also, what do valuations do of U.S. and Canadian shale producers? Because if their valuations start to increase along with the forward curve, so further out oil prices increasing, you could see a substantial increase in drilling activity in the U.S. and Canada, which over the short to medium term could start to offset some of the losses. So I would watch for both the immediate effect, which again, analysts much smarter than me with much more data than me are estimating at 5 to 15%, along with the potential revaluation up of very depressed levels of oil stocks in the U.S. and Canada.
Hussein, is there any room in the future for political talks between the Saudis and the Houthis? Are the Houthis willing to go tomorrow and talk to the Saudis and stop their attacks?
Of course, they are willing to do that, and they did that, I believe, in April in 2016 in Dhahran al-Janub, South Saudi Arabia. But because Saudi made that talk secret, then after that, Saudi didn't actually keep any of those agreements. But Houthi are well prepared to talk directly with Saudi Arabia. But we know that Saudi Arabia doesn't want to be a member of any future talk, or as well in the past talk, because they still call it a Yemen civilian war or Yemeni conflict. That's why Saudi actually, but I believe after those type of attack, and if Ansarullah, the Houthi Yemeni army extend their attack, they will force the Saudi to come to the table. But now it will be different. Now Ansarullah, the Houthi are stronger than before, so they will put their demand on the table.
Thank you. We'll have to leave it there. Hussein Al-Bukhaiti, Simon Meban, Josh Young, I really appreciate your contribution to the program and your insights. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website aljazeera.com for further discussion. Go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Hashim Ahlbara, and the whole team here in Doha. Bye for now.